I've been working timber most of my life. My daddy cut pulpwood, and his daddy before him. I guess you could say it runs in the family. I live in North Alabama, not far from the Tennessee line. These hills up here are thick with hardwoods, oak, hickory, and a whole mess of poplar. That's where I make my living. Now, this was late fall. Cool weather, leaves coming down, ground soft underfoot. I'd been hired on by a fellow to clear a patch of land that he wanted to plant pines on. It was good standing timber, most of it straight, clean trunks. I figured it would make for an easy cut. I'd been out there a couple of weeks, sun up to sundown, working my saw and hauling logs. One morning I dropped a big old red oak, and when it hit the ground, I noticed the butt end was hollow. Now that happens sometimes. Heart rot will eat the inside out, while the outside looks solid. Well, curiosity got me. I set the saw down and walked over. The trunk had split open when it fell, leaving a gap big enough for me to shine my flashlight down in. At first I thought it was just leaves and dirt packed inside. But then my light hit bones. Not just one or two either. Piles of them. Bits of broken deer antlers, rib cages, and skulls with chew marks all over them. Raccoon skulls, possum bones, and even what looked like a hog jawbone. Now, most of these had already been picked clean, and the bones had been cracked open, and the marrow was gone. Others still had a little bit of dried up and rotting meat left on them. There were a few that were whole carcasses, squirrels and rabbits mostly. Those were on top. It was all stacked down in there as if something had been using that hollow log as its pantry. And right near the mouth of the log, wedged in real tight, like it was the last thing pushed in, was part of a dog's body. I wasn't too sure, but then I saw it. A collar, faded leather, a busted buckle, and there was a little brass tag still hanging on it, and another metal tag hooked to it. I slid the collar off the shrunken body. I held it in my hands, then I wiped the brass tag off on my jeans. Dixie. The dog's name was Dixie. I knew it was a dog for sure because the other metal tag was a dog license. I'll be honest, that gave me a bad feeling. Now, coyotes will drag off a dog sometimes, sure, but they don't stash them in hollow logs like that. And bears, well, we don't really see many black bears around here, and the very few that do, they don't tend to stick around. I set the collar back down, and I stood there for a minute, just thinking. I remember saying out loud, shaking my head, "What the heck has been doing this?" I was still thinking on it when I suddenly realized the woods had gone very quiet. I mean, quiet. No squirrels chattering, no crows fussing, not even a breeze rustling the trees. It was just me standing there in an empty forest, pure stillness, staring at a log full of bones. I told myself to snap out of it, get back to work, quit letting my imagination run wild. I didn't have any answers, and I sure wasn't going to get any just standing there staring. So I shook myself out of it, fired up the saw again, and I went on cutting. But I'll be darned if every time I set another tree down, I didn't feel eyes staring holes right through me. But I never saw anything. Now that night, I went home dog-tired, but I couldn't sleep worth a lick. I kept seeing that hollow log in my mind, all those bones stacked so deep, and the collar. Dixie. Dixie was the dog's name. I wonder who was missing Dixie. It bothered me all night, right on through to the morning. Next day I went back to that tract. I had to. A job was there needing doing, and I needed doing it to get the money. I got there, and the sun was just coming up. There was dew heavy on the grass. First thing I noticed, my skidder tracks from the day before were half filled with water. Normal. But right there in the middle of the mud were prints. Big ones. At first glance, I thought it was a barefoot man that had walked through there, as strange as that might sound. But these weren't a man's foot. They were longer, wider, toes spread wide like big shovels, each one pressed down deep. I laid my hand down in one of the prints, and there was still space all around it with my fingers spread. My stomach dropped. I tried to follow the tracks, and I just went only a few yards. I saw that they circled the hollow log full of bones. Then they headed off into the thicker timber. I am not ashamed to say, my saw was quiet most of that morning. I spent half the day just listening and looking, watching the woods, listening to every snap of a twig that made me jump. Now, by mid-afternoon, after I'd eaten my sandwich, I'd had a good talk with myself. Just some fella out here playing tricks, I told myself. A hunter, maybe. Maybe they're mad I'm taking some of their prime hunting land and cutting it. Or maybe there's some old hippie barefooting through the woods. I came up with all kinds of scenarios to explain it. I sure made myself feel better, because after I ate my lunch, I went back to cutting. And that's when it happened. I had just dropped another oak, not 50 yards from that hollow log. As the tree hit the ground, I heard a strange sound behind me as my chainsaw kicked down into low gear. It was low, deep, like a chest-rattling grunt growl. I spun around, just sure I was going to see a bear. I saw something, but not a bear. But there it was. It was standing half hid behind a sweet gum, and it was staring holes right through me. Biggest darn living thing I'd ever laid eyes on outside of a zoo. It had to be 8 feet tall if it was an inch. Shoulders wide as a doorframe, arms hanging long with hands near its knees. Hair was dark brown, matted, like it'd been living rough out there. Its face, I still see it clear. Not an ape, not a man, but some kind of mashup that was somewhere in between. There was a heavy brow with deep-set eyes catching the light. Its nostrils were flaring with every breath. It wasn't baring its teeth or snapping like a wild animal. Even still, I knew it was mad. Mad that I was there. Mad at what I was doing. We locked eyes for maybe 5 seconds, but it might as well have been an hour. My saw was still rumbling in my hands, but I couldn't move. Then it stepped out from behind the tree. Just one step, heavy, but the ground, I swear, seemed to shiver with it. I dropped the saw. I didn't even shut it off. I just let it fall, chain spinning and all. I backed away slow, hands out like I was telling it, "I didn't mean no harm, mister." It didn't follow me, but it just stood there by the log, looking at me. Then it would look at the hollow trunk full of bones, and it was still mad. It huffed. I saw it through its nose, the nostrils flaring, and I saw the chest. I couldn't hear the huff over the chainsaw, but I saw it. In the next second, it turned and walked back into the timber. It had long strides, like it had all the time in the world, but at the same time it was telling me it was thoroughly disgusted with me and everything it had seen. I didn't finish cutting that tract. I went back and I told the landowner that he'd need to find someone else to clear it. He looked at me a little bit funny, but he asked me no questions, and I didn't care either way. I wasn't going back in there for anything. Now, sometimes I will be driving past that holler, away from the road, and I'll see treetops swaying when there's no wind or breeze, and I'll suddenly get a cold feeling in my gut, just like I did when I saw it step out from behind the tree. I know what I saw. Flesh and blood, walking on 2 feet, and it had a pantry full of bones that it didn't like me touching.